Hi, my name is Glenn Hoeppner. I'm a staff software engineer with TechSmith, which is my title, but I lead the security team. That's pretty much my full-time job now. I spoke last week with the last QA group, and due to some technical issues, we lost the recording. So I'm sitting here in my house right now, and I'm gonna roll solo through these slides. So no audience participation, but hopefully you'll still get something out of this. So my presentation is The Lion Always Eats, Introduction to Software Security. Already introduced myself. This is a quote. I can't remember where I heard this from, but I've heard this described as the fundamental security problem. Security is based on trust. Trust does not scale. So keep that in mind. If you're old enough to remember the era before cell phones, you had to make long distance phone calls. Like that was pretty much anybody who wasn't in your city or very close to you. Long distance phone calls were charged and it was a per minute fee, pretty expensive. And in the 60s through the early 80s, phone equipment was very big and sophisticated, expensive computer machinery like this. It operated on tones, right? Dial tones, busy signal, pulses, things like that. What you may not know is that it was also controlled by tones for technicians. They had equipment that would generate special controls, or tones rather, and then they could use these tones to send control signals to the system. And actually anybody could emit these tones to the system. So you remember how a couple slides ago there was trust does not scale. They were kind of trusting that no one other than technicians would generate these tones. Which leads us to this guy, John Draper. He's an early phreaker. And if you don't know, phreaker is a term that is used to describe a phone hacker. And this gentleman is better known by his pseudonym, which is Captain Crunch. And the reason that he is called Captain Crunch is because of this Captain Crunch whistle. This was a toy that was included in boxes of Captain Crunch cereal. And it generated a tone that was 2600 hertz. And guess what that tone did? It generated the technical controls for the phone switching equipment. And you could use it to make free phone calls. And there you go. So a little bit of an aside here. This is a magazine. It's called the Hacker Quarterly 2600. I'm surprised how many people do not know that the name 2600 of this magazine originates from that 2600 control tone from the Captain Crunch whistle that is used to control the phone network. This is actually an interesting read. It comes out with the seasons. You can buy this at Barnes & Noble or Schuler Books if you're in the Lansing area here. So the evolution of these tones for phreakers was what's known as the blue box. And this is a blue box. It basically just made it easy to basically make free phone calls. And people used to make these and they'd give them to their friends. You know, you go away to college and you want to call your college buddies, or, you know, 60s and 70s, you get drafted. You want to call mom and dad long distance, use a blue box, it's free, right? So the two guys that actually made this blue box, you might recognize as Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. And they actually made these and sold them to their friends. And in Wozniak's book, he actually tells this interesting story about how one of his friends was like, hey, I know a guy who'd like to buy a bunch of these from you. And they met this guy for lunch and quickly realized that he was involved with the mafia. And that was one of the reasons why they kind of got out of the blue box business. So anyway, that's old cell phones, but now we have cell phones in, like that was the sophisticated computer equipment in some switching station, right? But now we have these powerful little computers that are everywhere. In hackers or phreakers, it's not just like free phone calls that they're after anymore. So ways that cell phones abused, right, are there have been a few different bugs where somebody could send you like a very unusual character as a text message, and it would actually brick your phone. Like your phone would become unusable because of the text message that you would receive. Facebook got caught when you install the Facebook app. They would actually look at your call history and your contact list, and they'd suck in all those phone numbers and like use that in their relational database to like connect people. Countries hack cell phones to suppress ideas, freedom of speech, right? Like if you're a journalist who is a dissenter, they can, there's been plenty of examples of them going after phones to find and basically suppress these people. So why am I telling you this? Well, the hackers are the lions, and we're all just zebras. And the lion always eats. When the lion is hungry, there's lots of zebras to pick from. So what motivates a hacker? If you're in QA, you might be familiar with the idea of personas. So these are kind of like hacker personas, I guess, or motivations. The hacker might want your knowledge. Maybe you know something that the hacker wants to know. They're looking for an identity. Your identity has value, right? They want your money or your assets. You have valuable assets. You may have access to valuable computer resources. You know, we can get access to your computer and use it to mine Bitcoins or something like that. And then finally, you have valuable connections. Maybe you are related to someone who's famous, or you work somewhere important and you're a network administrator or something like that. Well, I think I said finally for the last slide, but this is actually the last one for personas. Boredom was a big motivator for hackers. I'm bored. What can I do? Let's put my brain to use. So how do you protect yourself from hackers? This is another quote that I heard. I wish I knew who said these things. Like I kind of remember them and don't remember the source. But I thought this is a good one. You don't know if you have security, but you'll know if you don't. Your users probably expect you to have security. When you open a bank account, do you say, I need to see the vault? I need to know how your doors are locked. You don't do that. You just trust that the bank is secure. And I think historically, this is how people have thought of their software and computers. Like, it's just safe. I would say that opinion is probably changing in our modern era because of just the number of breaches and other issues that occur. But generally speaking, I think your customers are still expecting your software to be safe. And security is a tough job. This is a survey that was done of chief information security officers. This is just a tiny bit, but 100% of security officers find their job is stressful. A third of them think that they would get into trouble or be fired if there was some kind of loss of security. And for good reason, because the stakes are high. If your company gets hacked and the wrong data is leaked, like you could be sued out of existence, basically, right? So security is not like just the CISO's job. Security is a team effort. It only takes one mistake for the hackers to win. So it requires participation from everybody. It's not fair to give one guy the role of making everyone safe. So how can you start with security? Well, what we've done at TechSmith is we established baselines. There are various security maturity models. These are just some of them. I'm not going to read off all of the links, but not all of these are necessarily related to software. If you look at these, there's going to be like IT or HR type activities on here too. But I think you will find things that are probably relevant to you in what you do or your organization. This slide is an example of the VSA. It's a spreadsheet. And it's just all these like little questions. Do you do static code analysis? How do you ensure your code is being developed securely? What percentage of your product's code is covered by automated testing? Stuff like that, right? The VSA is a good, very basic thing to start with. On the more sophisticated end of the scale, I don't know how well you can read this. This is the OWASP SAM. And what does SAM stand for? Software Awareness Maturity Model, I think is what it is. But this is an interesting one. It's the same thing. There's a bunch of questions, but these are far more in-depth than the VSA. So you answer all these questions, you know, and there's a drop down for the answers. It's like, I don't know if I can even read any of these on my screen, honestly. Are your development staff aware of your software assurance program, right? And then the answers are something like, no, nobody is, some people are, most people are, everyone is, that kind of thing. So you go through and you answer all these questions, right? And this one's kind of cool because it generates these reports. And so you get like the scale and it breaks things out into categories and you can kind of see like where your strengths and weaknesses are, right? So like in this one, you're doing pretty good at operations, not doing so good at the other things. And another chart that it makes is like this kind of spider graph, which is just a different representation of the same data. You can see like the bigger your category is, the better you're doing. But this is kind of a cool one too. And there's lots of great information in here. So anyway, the first thing is establish baselines. And the goal of your software security is that you want to fix things early, right? So this is just a stupid graph that I made as kind of meaningless numbers here. But this is true probably of just bugs in general, not just software issues. But the longer an issue goes out, the more costly it is to fix, right? So it's cheap to stop things when they're in the idea phase. When you're designing them, it's a little bit trickier. When you're implementing code, you know, that's getting towards the right side of the scale, testing. And then like once things are out into production, that's when they're the most costly to fix because you have to deal with like, well, how do we deploy fixes without disrupting users or breaking functionality and things like that. So the goal is to try and fix things as far to the left as you can. So just to reiterate, idea, design, implementation, testing, and production are the things on the chart here. So let's start with ideas. Let's face it, some ideas are just plain bad. Sign up to change your password. What's your old password? What's the new password? Probably not the greatest idea, right? And then moving along to fixing things in the design phase. There's this notion called threat modeling. I'm not going to do a deep dive on this because there's lots of information on the internet about threat modeling. If you just search, this is the method I'm most familiar with. It's called STRIDE. This was developed by Microsoft in the mid to late 90s when Bill Gates said, we're going to focus our company on security, right? And so what you do here with STRIDE, it's an acronym for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege, right? And so when you're designing something, you know, this is just a fake chart that I made up, a workflow diagram. Like the user comes to his computer connects to the internet goes to some web store. Maybe you do or don't buy anything. You get tracked in a CRM. CRM sends you email like, hey, good job buying our product, or we think you're interested in our widgets, right? And they send an email to the user. So if you're going to apply threat modeling to this diagram, you kind of look at all these arrows, and for each arrow you walk the acronym, right? So spoofing. Well, the user's connected to a computer and the computer connects to your website. How do you know that the user is who they say they are, right? How can you prevent against that? That's spoofing, right? And then Tampering. What if the user's at a Starbucks and he's using an insecure internet connection? How do you prevent somebody from like tampering with the data and say he wants to order 3 of your widgets and some guy in Starbucks hacks it to order 300 or something? How do you prevent against that? But that's basically it, right? You walk through all of these different connections here with the acronym and you document them. My recommendation would be to just brainstorm ideas and try not to get into solutioning. At the end, you go through and you say, these are the things that we think are most important and likely to happen. Then you work your remediations. It's highly likely you will have things that you say, you know what, this is an accepted risk. We don't really care about this, but it's good to know, even if you're not going to fix it. Like, knowing is half the battle, right? Here's another quote. Security is when people are doing the right thing, even when you're not looking over their shoulder, basically. And I put this slide in here because now we're on to the development phase. And I said I have a background in engineering. And I know developers are lazy. So security might take longer. And I don't want to take longer. I want to get my feature done so I can go on to the next thing, right? So what kind of remediations can you do for development? Well, training about how secure programming works. There's lots of resources for that. At TechSmith, we use, it's a paid product, but it's called the Security Journey. And if you just go to securityjourney.com, they have a lot of courses. And it starts kind of generic, but then it gets down into the code the farther you get. It's really been well received at our organization. But there's, again, free things out there. And just awareness even about common security issues. Paired programming, some guy sitting next to me or watching remotely while I write my code, he can help me find mistakes before I make them. That includes security mistakes. Code review is similar, but it's more of the code has been written, take a look and tell me what you think. You can find security issues that way, just like bugs. Automated testing, I think we know what that is. Code analysis, if you look for this, there are lots of free and commercial tools that do code analysis. The best way to describe this is like a spell checker for your programming. So if you make stupid mistakes in your code, it will call that out. And most code analysis tools do include finding programming issues that are also security issues. So that's kind of an important one. And again, I could do a whole presentation probably just on code analysis, but look for it on the internet and you'll find a lot of stuff. Supply chain safety is the kind of the new hot button thing right now. So like maybe you're secure, but what kind of inputs are going into your product, right? So I have a whole slide just on this. Again, developers are lazy. I don't want to reinvent the wheel, so I'm going to use some code some other guy wrote. I'm going to use an open source library or NuGet library, all these different packages that different languages have. That's great, but who wrote them? Was it some 12-year-old kid who, is trying to learn programming? Is it a company? What country are they located in? How often is it getting updated? Is it getting security updates? Like, is anybody looking at these things, or do you just say like, I found code that's, sorts widgets, and who wrote it? I don't know. It works. Stuff to look at. How secure is your development chain? The machines that you're working on, the build agents that your software is being compiled on. What if I could tamper with your executable or installer that you're delivering to your customers once it's on your website to download, kind of thing. All examples of places where hackers like to get in and cause havoc. And how secure are your employees? Everybody's working from home right now. Do you let your customers connect their cell phones to even your email, for example? There's a lot of Android ROMs out there. Like I have a custom Android ROM. It does something cool. How secure is that? Who checked it? Anybody? Probably not. The one that I like to harp on around the office is your network router. everybody has like these Wi-Fi access points they bought, and you know, you get your cable modem hooked up and you set up your Wi-Fi and you're like, yeah, it works, internet's super fast. And you never look at it again. But that's bad because almost all of these Wi-Fi access points that we have in our homes have huge security issues. And if they're exposed to the internet at all, they can easily be found and hacked. And so like your computer may be safe, but you know, you have your work computer that you took home when work from home started, but it connects to your hacked Wi-Fi router. How safe are you? I don't know, something to think about. The OWASP top 10, I'm transitioning more into the testing. This is still this is kind of overlap between development and testing. This is a popular thing. You might not be able to read all of these, but OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project. They put out this list of the top 10 security issues in applications. And it's very sad because it never changes, or very, very rarely changes. These are the top 10 things. We make these mistakes all the time. We've been making these mistakes for the last 20 years, and we continue to make the same mistakes over again. So it's important that engineers and testers be familiar with these mistakes and look for them specifically so they can avoid repeating the past. Like, again, if you search for OWASP top 10, you'll find this for sure, or lots of info about it. So I'm going to give you an example of two things that are on the OWASP top 10. This is called broken authentication is one thing, and bad access control. Now, the US Postal Service offers this feature called informed delivery. And what they do is if you have their app, or even if not, like when they process email, you know, it goes through this machine, it goes really fast. They actually take a picture of each piece of mail that goes through. And when you sign up for informed delivery, they will send you an email or a notification in the app every day. Here's the mail that you're going to get today. Here's a picture of all the letters you're going to get. And what hackers like to do is, as you can see here, they need your email mailing address. They put in your address, they sign up with their own email address, and then they get the images of the mail that's going to be delivered to your house every day. And guess what they do after that? They look for interesting mail, like, hey, it looks like Glenn's going to get a new credit card today. I think I'll swing by his mailbox before he gets home from work. They also tell you about packages, so packages on your porch. So here, I'm going to walk through this quick. They ask for your address. That's not particularly secret. You make a username, password, security questions. Great. I put in whatever I want. It doesn't need to be you. What's your contact information? Your name. I mean, that's not too hard to get. If they have your address, they probably your name. But also your phone number. I can put in whatever cell phone number here I want. I don't think the post office knows the difference. And the same thing with email address. And then what they do after you do that is they say, how do you want to verify? We can mail you a code, or you can do it online. And if you pick online and you have your cell phone in, you put your cell phone in here again. If you didn't already put it in, and they just send you a code and you put the code in the box. But again, I can use my own cell phone, right? And that's it, you're in. No mail today. Of course, I didn't have any mail because that was the day that I signed up for this. What I have since realized since I signed up for this service is they will send you a letter. It took about a week. I got a letter in the mail that's like, hey, you signed up for informed delivery. If you didn't do this, you better give us a call. Hopefully people are paying attention to that and not thinking it's junk mail. But anyway, I would like to recommend that you sign up for this service because even if you have no interest in seeing the pictures of letters that you're going to get every day, if you sign up for yourself, it prevents a hacker from signing up for you. This is a contrived example, so don't read too much into these images. These aren't real, but this is an example of a real mistake that programmers often make, which is predictable numbers. And so this is like, view my receipt on a website, and it's hard to see up here. but the address is like fake.com/view/orders/ID, and I think it's a 712. Well, what if I go up there and I put 713? Oh yeah, look, I can see someone else's receipt. And this is another mistake that hackers make a lot. So I guess what I'm getting at is when you're testing, you need to be putting yourself in the mind of a hacker. Are we disclosing any information here that we shouldn't be, that someone shouldn't have access to, that kind of thing? You just gotta put yourself in their mindset. Okay, so on my chart, we're all the way to the right now. This is like production. Well, what do you do when your stuff is in production? What if other people are finding security issues in your software right now? What do you do? Do you have a clear way for your users to communicate with you about security issues? Is there something on your website? Is there anyone looking at your Twitter, your Facebook, whatever? If you don't have one, you need to have one, or a way for that. And for the people who are using your Twitter, like maybe you have a social media manager or something like that, you need to make sure that that person knows when somebody reports a security thing that it needs to be taken seriously, and they need to know who to escalate to. So just some good advice there for you. This is MITRE.org. A CVE is acronym for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. And this has kind of become the de facto standard way that security issues are identified. A researcher will submit a vulnerability to MITRE here, and they'll assign it a CVE number. And then those are, generally speaking, what's used to track. So like when you get updates for your Microsoft Windows or your Mac, if there's vulnerabilities in it and you look at the actual, history, here's what's changed. They'll usually even say like fixes CVE, blah, 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 right? So if you go to cve.mitre.org, you should search for your products and you should search for your company. So what's on my screen here is Snagit, for example, from TechSmith, right? Like, yeah, there have been security issues in Snagit that we have resolved. But you have to be looking here because there might be things here that you don't even know about that you should be fixing. NVD is kind of a different window into the same data. It's the National Vulnerability Database. They have a little bit better interface, in my opinion, but it's basically the same data. Look here for vulnerabilities. Once you have a vulnerability, or many, hopefully not, how do you know how to fix them or how important they are? This is the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS. This is another like kind of industry standard thing. You can find this calculator at first.org. It's buried in a menu. It's like CVSS calculator something. This is a screenshot. So what you can't see here is this is a little bit interactive. If you hover over like these words, like if you hover over attack vector, it'll give you some text that explains what that is. And then what you do is you say like, well, how can this be executed? And again, if you hover over the options also, it will explain each option in detail. So you say like, is this an attack that requires physical access to the machine? Do I have to be on the same network? Is it something that can happen over the internet? And basically you roll through all of these questions and they assign a score, which you can see in the upper right there. This is a medium, but they go from, like 0 to 10. If you have anything that's like 9, I think it is like critical, really bad generally. Anyway, so when you find these issues, I would recommend using this as an input. I don't know that it needs to be the deciding factor in how you triage issues, but because this is what the rest of the world is pretty much using, it should definitely be a factor. Okay, and so I wanted to leave you with some security resources. These are some of my favorites. There's obviously tons of security resources out there. OWASP.org, you know, that's where the top 10 is. They have a lot of interesting information on there. Brian Krebs, which is KrebsOnSecurity.com, he's a journalist who actually went independent a number of years ago, and he writes exclusively about security things. Very interesting. He gets on the dark web and pretends to like be a black hat, a hacker, if you will. And so he can actually see the types of data that people are buying and selling and exchanging on there. And so he's actually been the first person to report lots of data breaches just because he has seen like, hey, it looks like Wendy's data is for sale. Does Wendy's know they've been hacked? And he'll write a story about it. He's also done a lot of like really incredible investigative journalism that have led to arrests. So yeah, he's a pretty interesting guy. His articles are kind of long, but they're really pretty interesting. Security Now is more of a technical podcast with Steve Gibson. Steve Gibson is actually the first guy to use the phrase or term malware. And so this is a weekly podcast. It's funny because when they started, they were like 12 minutes long, and now they're like almost 2 hours long usually. And it's just like security news. And he does a good job of explaining how things work, so you can kind of get a technical idea of where the problems are and what the mistakes are. Darknet Diaries is another podcast. I just started listening to this like last December, and there's, you know, like a huge backlog of episodes, and I kind of blew through all of them because it's very entertaining. This is more of like a narrative of here are famous hacks or something that have happened, and kind of like a story behind it. Or one of my favorite episodes, he had a guest on, and this guy does physical testing of security. So like he goes to banks or buildings, and he tells the story about how he went to a bank overseas and was asked to test their security. So he goes in this bank and he has a fake badge, and he goes up to the teller, you know, and excuse me, I'm here from IT. I need to work on your computer, blah, blah, blah. And somebody confronts him, which is what they're supposed to do, right? Is identify people who shouldn't be there and confront them. But it turns out that the guy actually went into the wrong bank. There were like two banks right next to each other, and he went into the wrong one. And it's like, oh boy, really breaking the law here. So that was kind of my favorite episode. So my last slide here was Q&A. And again, I'm re-recording this, so I don't have questions that people can ask. I tried to recall the questions that people asked me, and I could only remember like 2 of them, unfortunately. I was asked, do I feel like I know everything about security? And the answer is no. Security is constantly changing. So you basically have to look at security news and see the types of things that companies are doing to protect themselves, and the things that hackers are doing to get around these protections, because it's always changing. And I mentioned our security journey training that TechSmith uses earlier, and it's kind of funny because the guy at the end of every video, he says security is a journey and not a destination. And I think that's a very accurate statement. And the other question I remember being asked is, what are common errors that are made in admin pages? And I think that's a pretty easy one. The first thing that I see mistake of in admin pages is a lack, like too many people have access to admin page. So like, oh yeah, we have some tool, there's an admin page, and we just trust everyone at the company to use it. Probably not a good idea. You want to follow what's called the policy of least privilege, which is you only have the access to things that you really need to have the access to. And so what that means is not only should a limited number of people probably have access to admin tool, but those people should have controls or access within that application to only the things that they need, right? Like, so maybe I have a tool where I can manage customers, Can I look up a customer? Sure, that makes sense. I'm on the phone with technical support. I need to look something up. Yeah, I have the ability to look up customers. Should I be able to delete customers or change their data? Maybe not. I don't know. Depends on the situation. But too much control to users within that application would be another common mistake. And especially internal tools in general, I would say, are at risk because they don't, oh, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. It'll just be people in the building using it, right? So they're not as likely to get the same kind of attention as a customer-facing type tool would. Another mistake I would say in admin controls, and this kind of related a little bit to something I said before. So like maybe the user interface will prevent you from doing something that you shouldn't be able to do. Like I can't, in the UI, delete someone else's account, but I can delete my own, right? But what happens if I intercept that call or manipulate it, right? Like, so an example is like you want to delete a user. The user has some kind of ID. I can delete myself because the UI shows me a delete button, but behind the scenes, it's like JavaScript or something, and it says like /delete/user/ID2, right? Well, what if I go in as a hacker in that same tool and manipulate that ID to be 3? And then I submit it along. Like the UI wouldn't let me do it, but I can intercept that call and do it myself. Like, will it let me do it? It might. It probably shouldn't. I wish I could recall the other questions that people asked me during the presentation, but I am unable to. And so with that, I'm going to have to say that this is the end. So I hope you enjoyed this. And I didn't say this in my original presentation, so this is a bonus, I guess. But a lot of times I make these presentations like this, and it's like I only ever use it once. In this case, I'm using it twice, but mostly to the same audience. But if you're interested, I would be happy to do the same talk to other people in your organization or somebody else you might know if you want, or feel free to point them at this video even. So with that being said, I appreciate your time for watching this, and I hope that you learned something. So thanks a lot. Bye-bye.